I just was always a wild, loose kid in my neighborhood. I just always went for mine. I maintained myself. I knew how to hustle, and I definitely wasn't no punk.
These little running around like I wasn't brought up. I was brought up toting slammers. Like, so my belt had to be extra tight. You feel me?
Game, my nigga Punch Jim, what's poppin', homie? Capo, I still fuck with you. You already know. Shout out to Melly and everybody. I still fuck with my in Harlem.
I brought up toting slammers. Like, so my belt had to be extra tight.
If there's one thing Jim Jones never fails to do, it's keep his name buzzing. Whether it's through music or messy street drama, this man has a habit of clashing with just about anyone and always makes sure to remind folks about his gang ties whenever things heat up. But when he picked the wrong person to test, Ronald Herron, better known in the streets as Rod Diggs, that move almost cost him everything. A lot of people know Rod for his track Eulogy, but behind that music, he wasn't your average rapper. This man was living the life he rapped about, for real. Rod Diggs was the definition of street certified. We're talking about a dude whose name carried serious weight, not just in the booth, but in the streets too. His background was wild. Drug trafficking, armed robberies, and an unbelievable number of violent crimes stacked against him. His reputation ran so deep that when the feds came knocking, they didn't play around. He got slammed with 3 life sentences plus 105 extra years, basically a permanent lock-in to make sure he'd never walk free again. So when Jim Jones started moving reckless and got into it with someone like Rod Diggs, that was dangerous territory. People close to the situation even said Jim almost became another name in Rod's long list of enemies who didn't make it out alive. But let's set the record straight. Jim Jones isn't just some random dude who stumbled into trouble. He's got a past that speaks for itself. Coming out of the Taft Houses projects in East Harlem, Jim came up in one of the roughest environments you can imagine. He's even described it himself as the gutter within the gutter. From the jump, life forced him to grow up fast. He was out in the streets young, chasing money, learning the hustle, and surviving however he could. He's openly admitted to selling drugs back in the day, but made sure people knew he never used them himself. That street discipline was part of what made him who he is today.
I just was always a wild, loose kid in my neighborhood. I just always went for mine. I maintained myself. I knew how to hustle, and I definitely wasn't no punk. I'm from the era where we sold the drugs, we didn't use them per se. That was the quote-unquote.
But crossing someone like Rod Diggs, that was one move Jim probably wishes he thought twice about. Jim Jones wasn't just brushing shoulders with the streets, he was molded by them. From early on, he got tied into the Bloods through connections in Harlem and carried that identity with pride. You can hear it in his music, especially in tracks that shout out his roots loud and clear. One of his hits, Purple City Bird Gang, wasn't just a catchy tune, it was a salute to the Purple City Crew, a Harlem-based gang that ruled the blocks long before the Bloods even touched down on the East Coast. Yeah, Jim's always been about that Harlem life.
Blood, from this day on, when you see us throw it up, you be putting way more work in than half these Bloods that be out here and things like that. So you the homie now. When you see us throw it up, that's just that.
So yeah, Jim had been in the streets and had his fair share of run-ins with the lifestyle. But even with all that, what Jim had experienced was nothing.
He'd seen enough street action to earn his respect, no question. But even with all that, Jim's experiences didn't compare to what Rod Diggs had seen or done. Rod wasn't some neighborhood tough guy trying to act hard. He was knee-deep in the kind of street politics that could end lives or start wars. His name didn't need an introduction. People knew better than to even say it too loud. When these two finally crossed paths, the tension was instant. It went down at a recording studio, a place that should have been about music, not madness. At that point, Rod was trying to build his name as an artist, linking up with others like Shooter 93, dropping verses and building momentum. But that day, the universe had something else planned. Jim Jones just happened to be in that same studio working on his own session, and according to people close to the situation, Jim runs a tight ship when he's recording. No street talk, no drama, just music. He's known for keeping his hustle separate from his craft, and he expects everyone around him to do the same. But Rod Diggs, he wasn't built to bite his tongue. Word is he started talking about old blood politics and other gang-related business while in the booth, and that rubbed Jim the wrong way. Witnesses say Jim snapped and told him straight up, "Get the F out of here with that blood talk." At first, Rod couldn't even process it. This was Jim Jones, Harlem's own, checking him about gang talk. He thought he misheard, but Jim doubled down, repeating himself with the same energy. And that's when things got heated. Voices rose, threats were tossed around, and the whole studio felt that tension shift. People nearby had to jump in before things exploded. They managed to calm Rod down just enough to avoid a full-on brawl. But even as he left, Rod made sure nobody forgot the moment, smashing a glass door on his way out before storming off. And guess what? That wasn't the end of it. Later that same night, Jim had a performance lined up at Sue's Rendezvous, one of the hottest clubs around, but after what went down, the streets were already whispering that trouble was on the way. Everything at Sue's Rendezvous was smooth at first, music bumping, drinks flowing, the crowd hyped. But that peace didn't last long because out of nowhere, Rod Diggs walked in, and he didn't come alone. He rolled deep with a few of his guys, and the whole energy in that club shifted the second he stepped through those doors. The DJ spotted him instantly and gave him a loud shout-out, letting everybody know, "Rod Diggs in the building." That's when witnesses say Jim Jones froze. They said the look on his face was straight up shock, like he'd just seen a ghost walk in. The room got tight real quick. Jim didn't wait to see what was about to go down. He wasted no time and made a quick exit before things got messy. And thank goodness he did, because according to people close to the situation, one of Rod's guys was already on standby, just waiting for a signal. One look, one nod from Rod, and it could have gone deadly right there in that club. That's how serious things were that night. But what's wild is that Rod decided to let Jim walk away untouched. And for a man like Rod Diggs, that was shocking. He wasn't the type to shrug off disrespect, especially not after what went down in that studio. This man was known for handling problems personally, and usually that never ended peacefully. So when he chose to hold back, people in the streets were stunned. Some say Jim must have finally realized who he was dealing with, that Rod wasn't just some local rapper talking tough. Maybe someone close to him pulled him aside and told him the truth, that Rod Diggs wasn't to be played with. He wasn't a man you checked in public and lived to laugh about later. By then, Jim must have known he had crossed the wrong man. But to understand why Rod had that much respect and fear attached to his name, you gotta go back to where it all started, the Gowanus projects in Brooklyn, New York. These days, that area's been cleaned up, but back in Rod's time, it was a whole different world. Gritty, raw, and unforgiving. Growing up there meant facing crime and chaos every single day. But Rod didn't just survive, he thrived in it. He learned early how to move, who to trust, and how to make power plays that would later define his entire life. He got caught up in the streets young, bouncing in and out of correctional facilities, and that constant back and forth shaped him into the kind of man people didn't want to cross.
I brought up toting slammers. Like, so my belt had to be extra tight.
Over time, he built a name that carried serious weight. His rep spread beyond Brooklyn. People all over the city knew not to test him. That's the kind of legacy that made even someone like Jim Jones step back once he realized who he was facing. By the late 90s, Rod Diggs' story had already taken a dark turn, but what went down next sent him even deeper into the streets. In September 1998, chaos erupted in the Walt Whitman and Wyckoff Gardens projects of Brooklyn when gunfire broke out, leaving an innocent bystander dead. It was one of those moments that shook the neighborhood, and Rod's name started floating around more and more in street circles after that. Then, just 2 years later, on October 7th, 2000, Rod himself got caught slipping. He was shot in the leg during a heated dispute over a drug debt. But here's the thing, Rod wasn't the type to let anyone get away with that. Even while lying in a hospital bed at Kings County Hospital, he wasn't thinking about recovery, he was plotting revenge. While still hooked up to IVS, Rod called the shots. Literally, he organized a hit on the man who pulled the trigger on him, and his own cousins carried it out. That move only boosted his already fearsome rep in the streets. People started whispering that Rod Diggs could get you touched from a hospital bed. And the wildest part, he didn't hide it. He bragged about it later in a track with Uncle Murda on the G's Beat for Slow Down, where he spit, "I don't respect the shooter because he shot me in the legs." 2 days later, the Lyle homie was dead. See, if he was smart, he would have shot me in the head because I could get you shot from a hospital bed. That wasn't just music. That was Rod sending a message to anyone thinking of testing him. And sadly, that moment only marked the beginning of something darker. By 2001, Rod's life took another deadly twist. On June 16, 2001, a rival dealer named Frederick Brooks was gunned down inside the lobby of 198 Bond Street. A crime so brutal that people still talk about it today. Brooks was hit multiple times, face, neck, back, and head. No mercy, no hesitation. He bled out right there on the floor. Authorities immediately had Rod Diggs in their sights. He and several blood members reportedly scrambled to get rid of the gun, but it didn't take long for investigators to piece things together. By July 2001, Rod was arrested and facing murder charges in New York State Criminal Court. Prosecutors claimed they had two key eyewitnesses. Let's call them Witness A and Witness B. Both told the district attorney that Rod was the shooter, and both picked him out of a lineup. It seemed like an open and shut case until the courtroom flipped upside down. When it came time to testify, both witnesses suddenly changed their stories. They took the stand and said they didn't remember, claiming they'd been threatened by Rod Diggs and his crew. Just like that, the prosecution's whole case started crumbling. It was a jaw-dropping twist. And in true street legend fashion, Rod walked out of that courtroom looking untouchable. But little did he know, that was only the start of a storm that would eventually take him down for good. The courtroom drama didn't stop with just two shaky witnesses. Things got even messier when witness C took the stand. He claimed he saw Rod Diggs and Frederick Brooks arguing right before walking into the lobby together. What happened next sounded like something straight out of a movie. Witness C said Rod shoved Brooks up against the mailboxes, pulled out a silver pistol, and fired multiple shots. The scene was brutal and quick, but what made it even crazier was what came next. Witness C knew exactly what he was risking by opening his mouth. Going against Rod Diggs was basically writing your own death warrant. So to save himself, he lied about how much he really saw, downplaying his part just enough to stay alive. Even then, everyone in that courtroom could feel the tension. Then came Witness D, who had also been there that night and saw everything go down. But when it was his turn to testify, he froze. He flat out refused to identify Rod in court, terrified of what might happen to him or his family if he did. That's the kind of power Rod Diggs had. People feared even saying his name out loud. And guess what? That fear worked in his favor. The jury couldn't hold up the case without solid testimony, and Rod walked away a free man, acquitted, untouchable, and proud of it. Not long after, he was out there bragging that he'd beat the body, like it was another notch in his belt. But freedom only made him bolder. Instead of laying low, Rod doubled down on his empire. Through the early 2000s, he built up his own blood set called the Mad Dogs, running everything out of 423 Baltic Street in Brooklyn, a place that became infamous in the neighborhood. His crew was deep into everything: drugs, extortion, robberies, even murders. At one point, Rod caught a case for drug trafficking and got locked up, but that didn't slow him down one bit. He was still calling the shots from inside, running his operation like a true boss. By the time he got released in July 2007, Rod came out with even bigger plans. He wasn't done building, he was expanding. But of course, the streets never stay quiet for long. Not everyone was willing to play by Rod's rules. Around 2007, a local dealer, known in court papers only as John Doe, started selling crack in the same projects where Rod's crew operated, and that was a huge mistake. Rod saw it as straight-up disrespect, so he sent two of his men to handle it, to remind John Doe who really ran that block. They caught him in a building lobby, and even though one of John's friends tried to step in, things turned violent fast. One of Rod's guys pulled a gun, while the other cleaned out John Doe's pockets, taking around $600 to $700 in cash. When it was done, Rod told him it was nothing personal, but everyone knew that was a lie. That was a message, loud and clear, but Rod wasn't finished. Later, he allegedly planned to have John Doe killed to make an example out of him. But when he saw John walking with his son, something made him hold back. Maybe it was a moment of mercy, or maybe he didn't want witnesses that day. Still, a few days later, Rod made sure the message hit home. He cornered John Doe again, this time on the 12th floor of a nearby building, and gave him one last warning: stop selling on my turf, or else. That encounter said it all. Rod Diggs didn't make empty threats. He controlled his territory like a general running a war zone. And everyone in Brooklyn knew it. After that tense warning on the 12th floor, John Doe decided it was safer to back off, at least for a while. He laid low for a few months, probably thinking about that last encounter with Rod Diggs and realizing how close he came to losing everything. But eventually he crept back into the game, this time trying to move smart. Instead of stepping on Rod's toes again, he went straight to him for permission to sell on his turf. And surprisingly, Rod gave him the green light, but with one major condition: John Doe could only sell Rod's product, nothing else. That meant he had to buy directly from Rod's operation. No middlemen, no side hustles, and honestly, it was a power move. Before long, John Doe became one of Rod's trusted workers, overseeing shipments, handling deliveries from suppliers, and keeping the street-level dealers in check. Rod had turned a potential rival into a soldier in his empire, but of course the calm never lasted long around Rod Diggs. By May 2008, new trouble started bubbling up, this time from a man named Richard Russo. Word on the block was that Russo had a big mouth and an even bigger ego. One day, while hanging out in the lobby of 423 Baltic Street with some of Rod's crew who were pushing product, Russo started popping off, talking reckless. He questioned Rod's authority in Gowanus and even had the nerve to threaten his life, right there in front of Rod's people. That was the wrong move, because Rod didn't play when it came to respect. Just a few days later, on May 9th, 2008, Rod made his move. He found Russo chilling in that same lobby, like nothing had happened, and walked right up to him. Calm, cool, collected. He told Russo to step into the elevator with him and another crew member. Once those doors closed, it was over. Rod pulled out his gun and shot Russo on the spot, ending him right there in the elevator. Afterwards, Rod handled cleanup the way a man with power does, quiet and efficient. He handed one of his guys some cash to make sure everyone kept quiet and took care of the weapon. No witnesses, no evidence, no trace. That's how Rod kept his grip on the streets. Fear and loyalty went hand in hand, but that wasn't the last time someone tested him. Another name popped up not long after. Kendall Robinson, better known around the block as Smurf. Smurf had been stirring up chaos in Rod's territory. Street fights, robberies, random shootings, and all that drama was bad for business. Rod saw him as a loose end that needed to be tied up and fast. So Rod and one of his hitters started tracking Smurf down. They weren't just sending a warning this time, they wanted to make a point. On September 13th, 2008, one of Rod's guys finally found Smurf near 185 Nevin Street and opened fire with a .40 caliber pistol. Smurf somehow survived the ambush, but the message was loud and clear. Rod Diggs ran those blocks and nobody crossed him twice. Even though Rod wasn't physically there for that hit, everyone knew who called the shots. His crew handled the dirty work while he stayed in the shadows, untouchable, fearless, and always one step ahead. But as Rod's empire grew, so did the attention, and the feds were starting to take notice. To really understand how wild things had gotten, you gotta know what kind of people surrounded Rod Diggs. Take Kendall Robinson, aka Smurf, for example. This guy was just 21 years old and already deep in the game. By 2013, he was sentenced to life without parole for one of the coldest crimes imaginable. The victim was a 16-year-old girl named Alt Conyers. She had filed assault charges against one of Robinson's friends, and when she refused to back down, that sealed her fate. In an act of pure evil, Robinson hunted her down and shot her 3 times as she tried to run. Then, as she lay there begging for her life, he stood over her and fired 3 more bullets into her head and face. The streets were shocked. Even by Brooklyn standards, that was next-level brutality. That's the kind of energy Rod kept around him. Killers with no boundaries. By late 2008, Rod's empire was getting bigger, but so were his problems. His crew ended up beefing with another group selling crack inside the Wyckoff Gardens projects, just a few blocks from his base. One of Rod's people, a woman working for his operation, got pressed by a local dealer named Victor Zapata who told her she couldn't sell there anymore. And that was all it took to set things off. Rod's right-hand man, George Mejia, decided to confront Zapata, thinking he could handle it face-to-face, but it went sideways fast. On November 9th, 2008, Mejia got shot 5 times during the standoff. Somehow he survived, but Rod and his whole crew were heated. They wanted revenge, and they wanted it fast. While Mejia was laid up in the hospital, Rod called a crew meeting to plan the retaliation. And here's where it gets crazy. They recorded the meeting. The footage, which later surfaced under the title Project Music, showed Rod and his people plotting their next move like it was part of a music video. They were so confident, they actually uploaded it to YouTube as an extended cut to one of Rod's songs. It's since been deleted, but by then, the damage was done. That video gave investigators a front row seat to their madness. Not long after, on December 23rd, 2008, one of Rod's top hitters got caught slipping. Cops chased him down and found him carrying a .22 caliber pistol and body armor, ready for war. Rod managed to dodge that bullet, staying just out of reach, but everyone knew the heat was closing in. The feds were starting to watch his every move. Then came the breaking point. On September 27th, 2009, Rod finally tracked down Victor Zapata, the man who had shot Mejia. He spotted him in the Wyckoff Gardens courtyard, and without hesitation, Rod walked him down and opened fire, shooting him multiple times in cold blood. It was a public execution right in broad daylight. That hit made it clear Rod wasn't untouchable anymore. He was reckless, moving like he couldn't be touched. But his luck ran out fast. Just a few days later, on October 1st, 2009, police arrested Rod and one of his homies in a BMW that was double parked on a crowded Brooklyn street. And that arrest, it would kick off the chain of events that finally brought his empire crashing down for good. When police searched that double parked BMW, they hit the jackpot. A loaded 9mm handgun sitting right there with 10 rounds in the magazine, and from the smell of it, that weapon had been fired recently. It was clear Rod Diggs wasn't just carrying protection, he was moving like a man ready for war. But believe it or not, one of Rod's most bizarre arrests had nothing to do with drugs or violence. It started over something as petty as littering. Yeah, you heard that right. He dropped a gum wrapper on the ground, and a cop stopped him for it. Sounds harmless, right? Until that same officer realized Rod was wearing full-on body armor underneath his clothes. The officer later said, "I've stopped hundreds of people in my career, but he's the first one I've ever seen rocking body armor on the streets." That stop got him subpoenaed for the military-grade vest, and the media went wild, spinning headlines that the body armor bust was what finally brought down his empire. But the truth? That was just the tip of the iceberg. The feds had been piecing together a massive case on Rod Diggs for years. They already had witnesses, recordings, and surveillance. They were just waiting for the perfect moment to move in. And that moment came on October 5th, 2010. The NYPD and U.S. Marshals joined forces to finally bring him down. They'd been watching him closely, and when they spotted Rod heading into Club Amnesia in Manhattan with 2 of his crew members, they knew the time had come. As soon as Rod stepped out of the car, the cops swarmed. He barely had time to react before they had him on the ground and cuffed. The driver tried to peel off, tires screeching, crowds scattering, but police caught up with him within minutes. It was over. The man who once ran Brooklyn's underworld had finally fallen. But here's the crazy part. While Rod was knee-deep in crime, he was also trying to live out his rap dreams. He had already made a name for himself in the underground and even landed a feature on Waka Flocka Flame's debut album, Flockavelli, on the track Live by the Gun, alongside Uncle Murda and the Murder Team. The problem? His lyrics weren't just tough talk, they were confessions. Every bar he spit was a reflection of what he'd actually done in real life. In the song, Rod bragged about being shot and how his shooter was gone 2 days later, which lined up exactly with that hospital bed revenge hit. He shouted out his blood-set MMD, money, murder, drugs, the same crew prosecutors later charged him for leading. He even rapped about how his homies handled hits for him and how he'd taken people out himself, including lines that matched up almost perfectly with the murders of Victor Zapata and Frederick Brooks. The wildest part? They even shot that music video right in the Gowanus projects, the same place where all those crimes had gone down. It was like Rod was daring the cops to come get him, turning real-life felonies into street anthems, and he didn't stop there. On a remix of Slow Down, Rod rapped, "If you want to smoke a man on the avenue, then go beat the body with an 18B. At the time, nobody outside the streets knew what that meant. But later, investigators realized he was referring to the murder of Frederick Brooks, and 18B was code for the legal motion used to get his case dismissed. Rod was literally bragging about beating a murder charge through the court system in a song. Every lyric, every reference, every video came back to haunt him once the indictments hit. The same music that built his name in the streets would become the evidence that destroyed him. Fast forward to February 13th, 2012, and Rod Diggs' life took a turn he couldn't wrap his way out of. The feds finally dropped the hammer. He was officially indicted and hit with a jaw-dropping 23 federal counts, including racketeering, 3 murders, murder conspiracy, attempted murder, robbery, firearms charges, and major narcotics trafficking. The list read like something out of a mob movie, but this was real life, and Rod was staring straight at the possibility of the death penalty.
Alleged that Heron is guilty of racketeering charges for running a drug-dealing operation in the Gowanus housing development where he grew up. They also claim he was involved in 3 murders and 3 attempted.
For years, he had managed to play both sides, rapper by day, kingpin by night, but now all those verses about bodies, money, and power had caught up with him. The same lyrics he once bragged about in the booth were now being read out loud in court as evidence against him. And when the judge finally looked at the mountain of proof, the hits, the drugs, the recordings, the witnesses, it was game over. By June 26, 2014, the verdict was in guilty. Rod was convicted on charges of racketeering and 3 murders tied directly to his criminal enterprise. The prosecution had originally wanted him executed, but the death penalty got pulled off the table, not out of mercy, but because they wanted him to live long enough to feel the weight of every crime he'd committed. Still, that didn't mean he got off easy. The judge hit Rod Diggs with 3 life sentences, plus another 105 years. Most people would have broken down at that point, but not Rod. Standing there in his jumpsuit, he looked the judge dead in the eye and said, "You can sentence me to 10 life sentences. I'm only going to die one time, and God have mercy on us all." That moment had the whole courtroom frozen. But the judge wasn't moved, not even a little. He said Rod was intelligent and articulate, but completely detached from the pain and chaos he'd caused. So to really drive the point home, the judge granted Rod's wish. He added 10 more life sentences, bringing his total to 12 life terms plus 105 years. Rod was then shipped off to the one place built for men like him, ADX Florence, the notorious Supermax prison in Colorado known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. This is where the government locks away the world's most dangerous and untouchable criminals, the ones too violent or powerful to ever mix with the general population. He joined names like El Chapo, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, the Boston Marathon bomber, Larry Hoover, the Gangster Disciples founder, James Marcello of the Chicago outfit, and Mahmoud Abu Halima, one of the men behind the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. This prison is where nightmares live, 23 hours a day in total isolation, no contact, no movement, no escape. Over the years, Rod Diggs has tried to fight back from his cell, filing appeals claiming that his First Amendment rights were violated and that his lyrics shouldn't have been used against him in court. but every time the answer's been the same: denied. The court made it clear Rod wasn't convicted because of his music, he was convicted because of the life he bragged about living in it. And just like that, the man who once ruled the Brooklyn streets ended up locked away forever, his story serving as a brutal reminder that even the loudest street legends eventually fall silent. So what do you think? Was Rod Diggs just another victim of his own ego, or was he doomed from the start? Drop your thoughts down below. I want to know how you see it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that dive deep into the wildest lives of the rich, the ruthless, and the reckless. And if you think this story was crazy, wait till you see what's next. Click the video on your screen to keep the drama going, because the next one, it's even messier.